Worthless. Ethan said it like it was a fact, not an insult, like he was explaining the weather. The table went quiet, our friends suddenly very interested in their wine glasses. I remember the exact moment my fingers tightened around my purse, because inside it was a printed email. I wasn't supposed to have one with Ethan's name on a compliance audit that didn't look right. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I just looked at him and wondered how much he thought I didn't understand. Because the truth was, I understood more than he ever imagined. And then someone walked into the restaurant, stopped mid-step, and said my name. If you're watching from somewhere else, tell me where you are and what time it is there. I always find it grounding to know who's listening. And if you've ever been underestimated in a room like this, you probably already know why I stayed quiet. I turned before Ethan did. "Zoey Walker," the man said, already smiling like he'd just found something he wasn't expecting, but definitely recognized. "Daniel Reed," I replied, standing halfway out of my chair before I realized I had. "It's been a while." Ethan blinked. Once. Twice. I could almost see the moment his brain tried to catch up. "You two know each other?" he asked, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. Daniel glanced at him, then back at me. "We worked on a compliance review together a couple years ago. She helped flag a reporting inconsistency most people would have missed." There was a subtle shift at the table. It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped or said anything outright, but the tone changed. The same people who had looked away when Ethan called me worthless were now watching me with something closer to curiosity. Ethan's smile tightened. "Huh. Funny you never mentioned that he said to me." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because I didn't owe him one. Not here. Not like this. Daniel pulled out the empty chair at the end of the table. "Mind if I join for a minute?" he asked. No one objected. For the next few minutes, the conversation shifted into safer territory. Work, industry updates, supply chain disruptions. Ethan spoke more than usual, his tone a little sharper, like he was trying to re-establish control over a room that had quietly tilted. I listened. Daniel didn't say much, but when he did, he asked specific questions. Not broad ones, not casual ones, the kind that had edges, the kind that made people pause just a second too long before answering. At one point, his eyes flicked toward me, not obvious enough for anyone else to notice, but I caught it. A silent acknowledgement, maybe even a question. I didn't respond, because I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. Dinner ended not long after that. People made polite goodbyes, quick hugs, vague plans to meet again. Ethan shook Daniel's hand a little too firmly. "Good seeing you," Ethan said. "You too," Daniel replied. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "We should talk at the office this week." Ethan nodded, but I felt the tension in his arm as we walked out together. The drive home was quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where every second stretches just a little too long. He didn't speak until we were halfway up the elevator. "What the hell was that?" he asked. I leaned back against the mirrored wall, watching his reflection instead of him. "What do you mean, don't do that?" he snapped. "You know exactly what I mean. You just sat there like you had something over me." I let a small breath out. Maybe I was just tired of being talked about like I wasn't in the room. He scoffed. "Oh, come on, Zoey. Don't start acting sensitive now. It was a joke." It didn't sound like one. It was he insisted, and now my boss thinks that I'm married to some secret compliance expert I've been hiding. There it was. Not an apology, not even a hint of one. Just concern about how he looked. The elevator doors opened. We stepped out into the hallway, our footsteps echoing in the quiet. "You didn't have to make it weird," he added. I stopped in front of our door. "I didn't say anything." "Exactly," he said, his voice dropping. "That silence. That look you gave me, that's what made it weird." I unlocked the door and walked in without responding. He followed, dropping his keys onto the counter harder than necessary. "You're not going to start interfering with my work, Zoey. Whatever you think you saw, whatever you think you know, just stay out of it." That got my attention. I turned slowly. "I didn't say I saw anything." He hesitated. "Just for a second." Then he recovered. "Good. Keep it that way." The apartment felt smaller than usual, or maybe it was just the space between us that had changed. "I'm going to bed," he said, already heading down the hallway. "And Zoey, don't embarrass me like that again." The bedroom door closed. I stood there for a moment listening to the quiet. Then I walked over to my bag, unzipped it, and pulled out the envelope. The paper inside was slightly creased from how tightly I'd been holding it earlier. I set it on the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, casting a soft glow across the room. My inbox was still open from earlier that day. The same email thread. The same subject line: compliance audit discrepancy, internal review. I clicked it again. Slowly this time. Carefully. The numbers didn't change. The formatting didn't change. But now that I wasn't distracted, I started noticing patterns. Line items that looked normal on their own, but repeated in ways they shouldn't. Adjustments that were always just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. Approval timestamps that came in clusters, like someone was signing off on multiple entries at once. And there at the bottom of several entries, Ethan Walker, approved. I leaned back in my chair, letting the information settle. This wasn't sloppy. It was controlled, which meant it was intentional. A notification popped up on my screen. New message. From an unknown sender. I hesitated before opening it. Then I clicked. It was short. "Zoey, we need to talk. Check your attachments. DR." My pulse picked up. I downloaded the file, hovered over it, and then after a brief pause, I opened it. The file didn't open like a normal report. No formatted cover page, no summary, just raw data columns, timestamps, transaction IDs, vendor codes. It looked like something pulled directly from a back-end export not meant for presentation, which told me two things immediately. First, Daniel hadn't sent this casually. Second, whatever was in here hadn't gone through official channels yet. I leaned forward, scrolling slowly. At first glance, it looked like noise, hundreds of entries, small amounts, nothing dramatic. But I'd seen this pattern before. Not here, not with Ethan, but in other companies that thought they were being clever. You don't move large amounts all at once. You move small amounts consistently. You make them look like operational adjustments. I filtered the data by vendor. That's when it started to take shape. 3 names appeared over and over again. Northbridge Freight Solutions, Clearline Distribution, Harrow Logistics Group. They sounded legitimate, generic enough to blend in, but something about the repetition bothered me. I opened a new tab and started searching. Northbridge, nothing meaningful. A placeholder website recently registered. No real contact info. Clearline, same story. Harrow. This one had a little more presence. A business listing, a phone number, a registered address. I copied the address and dropped it into Maps. It was a mailbox facility. Not an office. Not a warehouse. A mailbox. I sat back staring at the screen. Zoey Maya's voice came from behind me. I hadn't even heard her walk in. "I thought you were taking a personal day," she said, setting her coffee down on the corner of my desk. Then she noticed my screen. "Okay. That doesn't look like a personal day." I hesitated. Maya wasn't just a coworker. She'd worked compliance long enough to know what she was looking at, and more importantly, when something crossed the line from messy to dangerous. "I need a second opinion," I said, finally turning the laptop toward her. She leaned in, scanning the data. Her expression didn't change at first. That was how she worked, neutral until she had enough to form a conclusion. Then her jaw tightened. "How long have you had this?" she asked. "Since last night." "And this is from—" I didn't answer right away. Maya looked at me, really looked this time. "Zoey, my husband's company." She leaned back, slightly processing that. "And his name is on approvals." "Yes." She exhaled slowly, then leaned forward again, more focused now. "Okay. Walk me through what you've seen so far." I explained the pattern, the thresholds, the vendor repetition, the timestamps. She nodded as I spoke, occasionally pointing at the screen. "See this," she said, highlighting a cluster of entries. "These are all approved within the same minute. That's not normal unless someone's bulk signing without review." I thought the same thing. And these vendors... She clicked through them quickly. "They're not just fake. They're structured to look real enough to pass surface checks. So this is intentional," I said. Maya didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes." The word landed heavier than I expected. I swallowed. Could it just be him following orders, like someone above him? Maybe she said, "But that doesn't clear him. It just means he's not alone." I nodded slowly. There was a part of me, small, stubborn, that still wanted this to be a misunderstanding, a glitch, a bad system. But systems don't create patterns like this. People do. My phone buzzed. "Ethan," I stared at the screen for a second before answering. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "Are you at work?" he asked. "Yes." Pause. "Did you talk to anyone about last night?" "No," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Good," he said finally. "Let's just keep things simple. Okay? There's a lot going on at the office right now." I felt Maya's eyes on me. "Simple," I repeated. "Yeah. No need to complicate things with assumptions." Assumptions. I glanced back at the data on my screen. "Right," I said. "No assumptions." We hung up. Maya didn't say anything right away. "He's worried," she said eventually. "I know. That means he knows there's something to worry about." I closed my eyes for a moment. I need to understand the full scope before I do anything, I said. "I can't go in half-informed." "Agreed," Maya said. "But Zoey, you also need to protect yourself." "I am. Not just legally," she added. "Emotionally." I almost laughed at that, but it didn't come out right. "I'll add it to the list." She reached over and tapped the screen. "There's something else." "What?" "These timestamps," she said. "They're consistent, except for a few outliers." I leaned in again. She highlighted one. "This one was approved at 2:13 a.m., so look at the location tag." I hadn't noticed that before. Each entry had a small metadata field attached, device location at time of approval. Most of them were tied to the corporate network. This one wasn't. It showed a residential IP. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped. "That's our building?" I said quietly. Maya looked at me. "Are you sure?" I nodded. I've seen that IP range before. It's our ISP, silence stretched between us. So he's doing this from home too, she said. Yes. Which meant it wasn't just pressure from work. It was something he carried into our life, into our space. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan. It was an email notification from Daniel. Subject line, additional records. I opened it immediately. There was another attachment, and a single line in the body. You didn't get this from me. Check the last sheet. I downloaded the file, opened it, scrolled past the first few tabs, summaries, reconciliations, nothing new. Then I clicked the final sheet. It took a second to load, and when it did, the room felt like it shifted. Because this wasn't just transaction data anymore, it was a list, names, account numbers, and a column labeled beneficiary. I scanned down the list, past vendors, past shell entries, until my eyes caught on something that didn't belong. A personal name, not a company, not a placeholder, a person. I leaned closer to the screen, and then I saw it clearly. Linda Walker. I didn't say anything right away. I just kept staring at the screen like if I blinked, the name might rearrange itself into something less personal. But it didn't. Linda Walker, Ethan's mother, not buried deep in the list, not hidden behind layers of shell entries. Just there. Plain. Direct. Repeated. Zoe Maya's voice pulled me back. What is it? I turned the laptop slightly so she could see. Her eyes moved across the sheet, scanning the columns, then stopping exactly where mine had. That's not subtle, she said quietly. No, I replied. It's not. There were multiple entries tied to that name. Not massive transfers, but consistent ones. Monthly, structured. Just like the others. Except these didn't go through the fake vendors. They went straight to a personal account. I clicked into one of the rows. Transaction ID, date, amount, approval chain. Ethan Walker approved. My chest tightened, but not in the way it had the night before. This wasn't shock anymore. This was clarity. He didn't just know, Maya said. He's part of it. I nodded slowly. And if his mom's receiving funds directly, she continued, then either she knows or she's choosing not to ask questions. I went to her house last night, I said. Maya looked at me. I thought something felt off. The renovations, the furniture. She's always been careful with money, but suddenly, I trailed off. Suddenly she's comfortable, Maya finished. Yeah. We sat in silence for a moment, not because there was nothing to say, but because saying it out loud would make it real in a different way. So what are you going to do? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I scrolled further down the sheet. That's when I noticed something else. A second column I hadn't paid attention to at first, reference notes. Most entries were blank. Some had generic codes, but a few had short phrases. I clicked into one tied to Linda's account. Family allocation. My stomach turned. I clicked another. Monthly support. Another. Priority. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't random, I said. It was planned, structured, justified. Maya leaned closer. That language, allocation, support, that's how people rationalize this internally. Makes it feel less like theft. It's still theft. Yes, she said. But to them, it's probably something else. Obligation, loyalty, survival. I closed the file halfway, then reopened it. I needed to be sure I wasn't missing anything. Look at the dates, I said. Maya did. They line up with... She prompted. with when Ethan said he was under extra pressure at work, when he started staying late, when he said bonuses were delayed, and instead, she said, he was redirecting funds. The words felt heavy, but they didn't shake me the way I expected. Because somewhere between last night and now, something had shifted. I wasn't trying to protect him anymore. I was trying to understand the full shape of what he'd done. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring, then stop, then ring again. Maya glanced at it. You going to answer? Not yet, the third time I picked it up. Hey, I said. Why didn't you answer the first 2 times he asked? No greeting, no softness. I was in a meeting. Pause. Right, he said. Listen, I need you to come by my mom's place tonight. That caught me off guard. Why? Just come. There are things we need to talk about. All of us. All of us. My grip tightened slightly around the phone. I was just there yesterday. I know, he said. This is different. How? Another pause. Then more controlled this time, Zoey. I'm trying to fix something. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Fix something. That phrasing again. Not explain, not admit. Fix. I'll think about it. I said. Don't think too long, he replied. This isn't just about you. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Maya raised an eyebrow. That sounded coordinated. It was, I said. He wants me in a room with both of them. Why, I looked back at the screen, at the list, at the repeated entries, at a guess I said, to control the narrative before it leaves the family. Maya crossed her arms. And are you going to let him? I didn't answer right away, because part of me knew exactly what he was trying to do. He wasn't just worried about the company anymore. He was worried about me, what I knew, what I might say, what I might do. I closed the laptop gently. I'm going, I said. Maya studied me for a moment. You sure that's a good idea? No, I said honestly, but it's a necessary one. Then don't go in unprepared. I won't. She nodded. Good. I packed my things slowly, not rushed, not scattered, deliberate. Because if this conversation was going to happen, it wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be structured, and I was going to listen more than I spoke. As I stood up to leave my email refreshed, another message from Daniel. No subject this time. Just a short line. Be careful who frames the story first. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Because for the first time since this started, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about who got to define it. And tonight, Ethan was planning to try. Linda Walker's house looked exactly the same from the outside. Neatly trimmed hedges, fresh paint on the shutters, the same soft porch light that had always made the place feel safe. But once you've seen the numbers, you don't see things the same way again. I sat in my car for a moment longer than I needed to engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the front window, I could see movement shadows crossing the living room. Ethan was already inside. Of course he was. He needed to be there first. I stepped out, closed the door quietly, and walked up the path. Linda opened the door before I could knock. Zoey, she said, her voice warm in a way that felt practiced. Come in. I studied her face for a second. Nothing obvious, no panic, no guilt. Just control. Thanks, I said, stepping inside. The smell of something cooking lingered in the air, but the dining table was already cleared. No plates. No setup for a meal. This wasn't a visit. It was a meeting. Ethan stood near the kitchen island, arms crossed, posture tight. He didn't smile when he saw me. Finally, he said. I ignored the tone and set my bag down by the chair. You said this was important. It is, he replied. Linda closed the door behind me. Let's sit, she said, gently gesturing toward the living room. We did. Not close. Not comfortable. 3 people arranged in a triangle, each watching the others. Linda was the first to speak. Zoe, Ethan told me there's been some confusion, she said carefully. Confusion! I almost smiled. About what I asked. Ethan exhaled sharply. Don't do that. You know what this is about. Then say it, I said, meeting his eyes. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. Linda stepped in. There are some financial matters related to Ethan's work that you may have misunderstood. I haven't misunderstood anything, I said quietly. Silence settled over the room. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Zoe, listen. The company system isn't perfect. There are adjustments that have to be made to keep things running. It's not as simple as what it looks like on paper. Adjustments, I repeated. Yes, he said quickly. Reallocations. Temporary transfers. It's all internal. I held his gaze. Then why are funds going to external vendors that don't exist? His jaw tightened. And why? I continued, my voice steady. Are some of those funds going directly to a personal account under your mother's name? Linda inhaled sharply. Ethan's head snapped toward her for a split second before he caught himself. There it was. Not surprise. Recognition. Linda straightened slightly. Zoe, she said softer. Now you have to understand. Family takes care of each other. Ethan has always helped me when things were difficult. With company funds, I asked. It's not like that. Ethan cut in. You're twisting it. Then explain it, I said. He hesitated. Not because he didn't have an answer, because he was choosing which one to give. Linda reached for his arm. Let me, she said quietly. He didn't stop her. She turned to me, her expression shifting, less defensive, more persuasive. When Ethan started moving up in the company, there were expectations, she said, performance targets, pressure from above, and at the same time we were dealing with medical bills, the house, everything falling apart at once. I listened, carefully. He didn't take anything for himself, she continued. He was trying to keep everything stable. For everyone. By creating fake vendors, I asked. They're not fake, Ethan said quickly. They're placeholders, temporary structures. That wrote money back into accounts you control, I said. He didn't answer. Linda leaned forward slightly. Zoe, this isn't about right or wrong in the way you're thinking. It's about survival. About doing what needs to be done when the system doesn't give you another option. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not even disappointment. Understanding. Not agreement, but understanding. You had options, I said. They just weren't the ones you wanted. Ethan shook his head. You don't get it. You've never had to carry this kind of pressure. I've worked compliance for 8 years, I replied. I understand pressure. I also understand consequences. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid, he said. We. Not I. We. Linda's hand tightened around his arm. Zoe, she said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. We're asking you to keep this within the family. No reports, no outside involvement. We can fix it." There it was again. Fix. I leaned back slightly, studying them both. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" I asked. Ethan exchanged a glance with Linda. Then he said, "We shift the responsibility. There are people higher up who've signed off on these processes. We redirect attention there. Clean up what we can on our end." "Meaning you blame someone else," I said. "Meaning we survive this," he replied. The room went quiet. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock somewhere in the hallway. Linda spoke again, more carefully this time. "You're part of this too now, Zoey," she said. "You've seen the information. If this becomes an investigation, they'll ask what you knew and when. They'll ask why you didn't report it immediately." I met her gaze. "I'm aware." "So protecting Ethan protects you," she finished. There it was. Not just persuasion, leverage. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. "I see," I said. Ethan leaned forward. "Then you understand why we need you on our side." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who had called me worthless less than 24 hours ago, at the man who now needed me. And for the first time since this started, I felt something shift completely into place. Not fear, not confusion. Clarity. "I understand exactly what you're asking," I said. Ethan exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Good," he said. "But you're wrong about one thing." His expression tightened again. "What I stood up picking up my bag." "You think this is about sides?" I said. "It's not." Linda frowned slightly. "Then what is it about?" I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle. "It's about the truth," I said. Ethan's voice sharpened. "Zoey, don't walk out like that. We're not finished." I opened the door. "No," I said calmly. "You are." I stepped outside into the cool night air, closing the door behind me. My phone vibrated in my hand almost immediately. A new email. From Daniel. Subject line: internal review. Next steps. I didn't open it yet, because I already knew what it meant. This wasn't something that could be handled in a living room, and whatever Ethan thought he could control, he was already too late. I didn't open Daniel's email until I was back in my car, not because I was avoiding it, but because I wanted a clear head when I did. The street outside Linda's house was quiet. No traffic, just the low hum of distant engines and the occasional flicker of a porch light turning off somewhere down the block. I unlocked my phone and tapped the message. Internal review. Next steps. The body was longer this time. Zoey, we're initiating a formal internal investigation tomorrow morning. You've been listed as a potential material witness based on prior audit involvement and recent access logs. If you choose to participate, we will need a full disclosure of any data you've reviewed, including timestamps. Legal will be present. You are not under obligation to protect any employee. You are, however, obligated to protect yourself. Daniel. There was an attachment below it. A calendar invite. 9 a.m. Executive Conference Room. I stared at it for a few seconds, then closed the email. My reflection in the windshield looked different than it had earlier that night. Not stronger, not braver, just clearer. I started the engine. The drive home felt shorter than usual, even though I took the long route without thinking. My mind wasn't racing anymore, it was organizing. Facts, sequences, risks. By the time I pulled into the garage, I already knew what I needed to do next. Inside the apartment was dark. Ethan hadn't come back yet. That surprised me less than it should have. I set my bag down and walked straight to the kitchen, placing my laptop on the counter. The same counter where just hours ago I had first opened that email. Now everything felt different. Not because the situation had changed, but because I had. I opened my laptop and logged in. The email thread was still there. So were the attachments Daniel had sent. I created a new folder, labeled it Personal Archive. Then I started organizing every file I had accessed, every timestamp, every note I had taken mentally but hadn't written down yet. I wrote them now. Simple, precise. No assumptions. Just what I saw. What I verified. What I could prove. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "Where are you?" he asked. "Home." Pause. "I thought we agreed to talk this through," he said. "We did talk," I replied. "You explained your version." And he pressed. "And I listened." "That's it." His voice sharpened. "You're not going to say anything I am," I said calmly. "Just not tonight." Silence. Then quieter, Zoe. "Don't do something we can't take back." I leaned against the counter, looking at the screen in front of me. "I think we're already past that," I said. Another pause. "You think they're going to protect you?" he asked. "You think Daniel's on your side?" "This isn't about sides. It always is," he snapped. "You just don't see it yet." I didn't respond, because arguing with him wouldn't change anything. "Look," he said, his tone shifting again, softer this time. "We can fix this. I told you we can redirect things, clean it up before it goes further." "By blaming someone else?" I asked. "It's not blame if it's shared responsibility," he said quickly. "There are people above me who signed off. I'm not the only one here, but you're one of them." He exhaled sharply. "Zoe!" "I'm not going to lie for you," I said. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they landed harder. The line went silent. Then. So that's it. That's it. You're choosing this over us." I thought about that for a second. "No," I said. "You made that choice when you decided this was acceptable." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed again. Less controlled. More raw. "You think you're better than me?" he said. "No," I replied. "I think I'm responsible for myself." Another silence. Then the line disconnected. I set the phone down. For a moment, I just stood there. Not shaking. Not crying. Just still. Then I went back to the laptop. There was one more thing I needed to check. The metadata. I reopened the transaction file and filtered by device location again. The residential IP entries. There were more than I had noticed earlier, different dates. Same network. Our network. I cross-referenced them with my own activity logs. Times I was home, times I wasn't. There were overlaps, but also gaps. Entries approved when I wasn't there. Late nights, early mornings. Patterns that didn't match normal work behavior. I exported the subset into a separate file, labeled it clearly, then I attached it to a draft email. To Daniel Reed's subject supplemental data. Residential access points. I didn't send it yet, not because I was unsure, but because once I did, there would be no version of this where things went back, not even to something broken. Just forward. I saved the draft, closed the laptop, and finally allowed myself to sit down. The apartment felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just different. Like something had already ended even if the paperwork hadn't caught up yet. My phone buzzed again. Not Ethan. A new notification. Company system alert. I frowned slightly and opened it. It was automated. Access log update. Review required. That was new. I tapped into it. A list of recent system activities appeared, and there at the very top an entry from less than 5 minutes ago. User Ethan Walker, Action Remote Access. Financial Approval Module location, unknown device. I stared at the screen. He wasn't home. He knew the investigation was starting, and he was still accessing the system, still making moves. I leaned back slowly, because whatever he was trying to fix, he wasn't cleaning anything up. He was changing something, and I hadn't seen it yet. I reopened my laptop immediately. The system alert was still on my phone, but I needed context-full access, not just a notification summary. I logged into the secure portal I used for external compliance reviews. It wasn't Ethan's company system, but it mirrored enough of the structure to interpret behavior patterns. If Ethan had just accessed the financial approval module minutes ago, there were only a few reasons. He was either trying to erase something, or he was trying to move something. Neither option was harmless. I pulled up the latest data set Daniel had sent and cross-referenced the timestamps. Then I checked the audit trail format the way actions were logged internally. Approvals, edits, overrides. Even if he tried to clean records, the system wouldn't erase the trail completely, not without leaving inconsistencies. Unless... My stomach tightened slightly. Unless he wasn't deleting. Unless he was shifting the trail. I opened the subset of transactions tied to the vendor accounts and sorted by last modified. There it was. Several entries had been updated within the last 10 minutes. Same vendors, same amounts, different internal tags. I leaned closer. The reference notes column had changed. Family allocation was gone, replaced with operational correction. I didn't react right away. I just kept scrolling. More entries, same pattern, language adjusted, labels cleaned, but the underlying transaction IDs hadn't changed, which meant the money trail was still there. He wasn't erasing the act. He was rewriting the explanation. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Daniel.
Zoey,
he said the second I answered. Are you seeing this? Yes, I replied. He's modifying reference notes. Not just that, Daniel said. He's attempting to reclassify entries under operational variants. If that sticks before the audit snapshot locks, it complicates the investigation. Not impossible, I said. No, he agreed. But messier. I watched the updates continue in real time. He knows the window, I said. He's trying to get ahead of the official capture. That's my read too. There was a brief pause. Zoey. Daniel continued, his tone more measured now. If you have anything additional, any local copies, screenshots, exports, this would be the time. I glanced at the draft email I had prepared. I do, I said. I haven't sent it yet. Send it, he said. Now. I hesitated, not because I was unsure of the decision, but because I understood what this moment meant. Once I sent that data, Ethan wouldn't just be under suspicion. He'd be exposed. I'm sending it, I said. Good. The call ended. I attached the file. Read the subject line once more. Supplemental data. Residential access points. Then I hit send. The confirmation appeared instantly. Message sent. I exhaled slowly. There was no rush of relief, no dramatic shift, Just a quiet, irreversible step forward. My phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan. "Why are you still logged into anything related to this?" I stared at the screen. He knew, or at least he suspected. I didn't respond. Another message came through seconds later. "Zoey, don't do this." Then, "You don't understand what's actually happening." I set the phone down without replying, because I understood enough. More than enough. I turned back to the laptop. The updates had stopped. No new modifications in the last 2 minutes. Either he had finished, or he had realized it was too late. I refreshed the dataset. One final change appeared at the top. A single entry, different from the others. Not a vendor, not Linda's account. A new beneficiary line. Unfamiliar, no history, just one transaction. Large, much larger than the rest. Approved moments ago. I clicked into it. Transaction ID. Timestamp. Approval chain. Ethan Walker approved. My eyes moved to the beneficiary field. The name wasn't one I recognized, but the account number, I'd seen that format before. Not in vendor systems, not in personal accounts, in escrow structures, temporary holding accounts, used when someone needed to move money quickly before redirecting it elsewhere. I leaned back slightly, the pieces starting to connect. This wasn't cleanup. It was extraction. He wasn't fixing the system. He was pulling something out of it. My phone rang. "Daniel again." I answered immediately. "We just saw it," he said. "The large transfer?" I asked. "Yes. He's moving funds," I said, "not hiding them." "We're locking system access now," Daniel replied. "But if that transfer clears, it won't be easy to trace cleanly," I finished. Silence for a beat. Then Daniel said, "Zoey, there's something else." "What?" "That account." "I know I said, it's not a vendor." "No," he said. "It's tied to an executive-level authorization chain." I frowned. Meaning Ethan shouldn't have been able to access it alone. The room felt very still. "So he's not acting independently," I said. "That's what this suggests." I looked back at the screen, at the transaction, at the timing, at the scale. "Then whoever else is involved," I said slowly, "just made a move too." Daniel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. "We're escalating this beyond internal review." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "That's probably the right call." "Zoey, thank you," he said. I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't about gratitude. It was about consequences. After the call ended, I sat there staring at the screen, at the final transaction, at the name I didn't recognize. Because if Ethan wasn't the only one, then this wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. It was something bigger. And somewhere in that system, someone else was watching this unfold, just like I was. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind wouldn't let go of one detail. That final transaction. It didn't fit the pattern. Everything before it had been controlled, measured, repetitive, designed to blend in. But that one, it was fast, large, out of rhythm. People who operate quietly don't suddenly get loud unless something forces them to, or scares them. By 6:30 a.m., I was already dressed, laptop open, reviewing everything again. Not from the beginning, but from the end, working backward. Because whatever triggered that transfer happened recently. My phone buzzed. "Maya, you're up early?" she said the moment I answered. "I never went to bed." "Yeah," she replied. "I figured. I just saw the internal notice. Your husband's company is in full lockdown mode." Define lockdown. System access restricted. Legal team looped in. Senior execs called into an emergency review. "This isn't contained anymore, Zoey." I leaned back slightly. "Good." She paused. That didn't sound like relief. "It's not," I said. "It just means whatever's happening is bigger than we thought." "Because of the transfer?" "Yes. You saw it too, I did." Maya exhaled slowly. "That amount doesn't match anything else in the dataset. It's not padding. It's not smoothing. It's extraction." "Exactly. And you think Ethan initiated it? I think he approved it," I said. "But I don't think he decided it." Silence. "Meaning someone else is driving this," she said. "Yes, and he's either following orders or trying to get ahead of them. Or both." Maya didn't respond right away. "Zoey," she said finally, "if this goes where I think it's going, you need to be careful. This stops being a corporate issue and starts becoming a legal one very quickly." "I know. Then don't assume everyone involved is going to play by the same rules you are." I glanced at my laptop screen. "I'm not assuming anything." We hung up shortly after. At 8:45, I walked into the building where Ethan worked. Not as his wife. Not as someone connected to him at all. Just Zoey Walker, compliance analyst, material witness. The lobby felt different than it had the last time I'd been there. More people, more tension, conversations that stopped when someone walked too close. I checked in with security and was escorted upstairs. The executive conference room was already full. Daniel Reed stood near the head of the table speaking quietly with two members of the legal team. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. Ethan was there too, seated halfway down the table. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Our eyes met for a second. He looked away first. I took a seat across from him. Not next to him. Not near him. Across. Daniel stepped forward. "Thank you for coming," he said, addressing the room. "We're going to move quickly. As of this morning, system access has been restricted, and all financial approval functions are under review." He paused, letting that settle. "We've identified a series of irregular transactions over the past several months, including a significant transfer initiated late last night." No one spoke. No one needed to. "We're going to walk through the data," Daniel continued, "then we'll open the floor for statements." The lights dimmed slightly as the screen behind him came to life. Charts, tables, timelines, clean, organized. Unavoidable, I watched as the patterns I had spent hours tracing were laid out in front of everyone. The vendor loops, the structured adjustments, the approval chains. Ethan sat still. Too still. Like he had decided not to react at all. Then Daniel moved to the final slide, the large transfer. The room shifted. You could feel it. Because this wasn't subtle. This was exposure. "Can you explain this transaction?" one of the legal team members asked, looking directly at Ethan. A beat passed. Then Ethan spoke. Calm. Measured. "It was authorized," he said. "By whom?" Daniel asked. Ethan hesitated. Just for a second. "By executive directive," he replied. The room went quiet again. Daniel's expression didn't change. "Which executive?" Ethan leaned back slightly. "I'd prefer to discuss that in a more controlled setting," he said. "That's not how this works," one of the attorneys said sharply. "You initiated the approval. You provide the context." Ethan's jaw tightened. I followed instructions, he said. The account was flagged for reallocation. That account is an escrow structure, Daniel said. It's not used for standard reallocation. Ethan didn't respond. Daniel stepped closer to the table. Who gave you access to that account, he asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Ethan said something I hadn't expected. Zoey knows how these systems work, he said, his voice steady. She can confirm that access can be shared under certain conditions. Every head in the room turned toward me. There it was. Not direct blame. Not yet. But the beginning of a shift. A repositioning. I held his gaze. Calm. Unmoved. That's not accurate, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Access to that level requires explicit authorization and dual verification. It's logged. It's traceable. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. And if someone else used my credentials? He asked. Then the system would still show the originating device an access point, I replied. Daniel nodded once. Which it does, he said. A document appeared on the screen. Access logs. Detailed. Precise. Device IDs. IP addresses. Timestamps. My chest tightened slightly as I recognized the pattern. Because this wasn't just the company network. Some of the entries were from our apartment. The room went completely silent. Daniel looked at Ethan. Would you like to explain why executive-level access points were used from a residential network under your control? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the screen, then at me, and for the first time since this started, there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not defensiveness, fear, but not fear of being caught, fear of something else. Something behind this. He leaned forward slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was lower, more careful. You're looking in the wrong direction, he said. Daniel didn't react. Then point us in the right one. Ethan held his gaze, and then he said a name. Not his, not mine, not his mother's. A name I hadn't heard before. And the moment it left his mouth, I realized this wasn't the full truth. It was the beginning of something else. The name hung in the room like it had weight. Mark Ellison. Ethan said. No one reacted immediately, but not because they didn't recognize it. Because they did. I saw it in Daniel's face first. Not shock, not confusion, just a quiet recalibration. One of the attorneys leaned forward. Senior Vice President Finance, she said almost to herself. The room shifted again. Not outwardly, but in the way people stopped looking at Ethan like he was the center of the problem and started seeing him as part of something larger. Daniel clasped his hands in front of him. You're stating that Mr. Ellison authorized the transfer. I'm stating that access to that account didn't originate with me, Ethan replied. And it didn't start last night. Careful wording. Not a denial. Not a confession. A redirect. Then explain your role, Daniel said. Ethan exhaled slowly like he'd been holding that moment back. I approved entries I was instructed to approve, he said. At first they looked like normal adjustments. Then they became more structured. You're describing months of activity, the attorney said. You're saying you didn't question it? I did, Ethan replied. And I was told it was being handled at a higher level. By Mr. Ellison. Ethan didn't answer directly, but he didn't need to. Daniel turned to the legal team briefly, then back to Ethan. And the transfer last night, that wasn't part of the original pattern, Ethan said. That caught my attention. You initiated it, Daniel pressed. I executed it, Ethan corrected. There's a difference, Silence. Then Daniel said, "Explain the difference." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together now. Everything before last night was controlled, predictable, built to pass internal thresholds. But once the audit flags started showing up, he paused. Choosing his words, the instructions changed. What instructions, the attorney asked. To consolidate exposure, Ethan said. The phrase landed heavily, meaning, Daniel asked. Move funds into a single structure. Reduce traceability across multiple vendors. Limit how many entry points investigators could follow. I felt my stomach tighten. Because that wasn't panic. That was strategy. And you followed that instruction, Daniel said. Yes, without questioning it. Ethan's jaw tightened. I questioned it. I just didn't refuse it. The room went still again. Daniel nodded once slowly. And Mr. Ellison gave you that instruction? Ethan hesitated. There it was again. That fraction of a second. I received it through his office, he said. Not the same thing. Not exactly. Daniel caught it too. That's not what I asked. Ethan leaned back slightly. It's what I'm willing to say in this room. A quiet line drawn. Not defiance. Protection. Of someone. Or something. The attorney stepped in. We can escalate this to a formal deposition if necessary. Ethan didn't react. He just sat there. Still. Controlled. Then Daniel turned to me. Zoey, he said you've reviewed the transaction patterns independently. Based on what you've seen, does this align with a coordinated structure or isolated misconduct? Every eye in the room shifted again. Back to me. This time there was no hesitation. Coordinated, I said. My voice was steady. Consistent vendor cycling, threshold-based adjustments, centralized approval patterns. It's not random. It's designed. Designed by one person, Daniel asked. No, I said. Not at this scale. Silence, because that was the answer no one wanted to say out loud. Daniel nodded once. Thank you. He turned back to the room. We're suspending further internal discussion at this level. This will be escalated immediately. The legal team began gathering their files. The meeting was ending, but nothing about this felt finished. Ethan stood slowly, not rushed, not shaken, just deliberate. For a second I thought he was going to walk out without looking at me, but he didn't. He stopped, turned, and met my eyes. There was something there I hadn't expected. Not anger, not resentment. Something closer to regret. You think this ends cleanly? He said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. I didn't respond. People like Ellison don't just disappear because of a report, he continued. They adjust. They survive. And what about you? I asked. A brief pause. Then he said, I already told you I did what I had to. I held his gaze. No, I said. You did what you chose to. The words landed. He didn't argue, didn't push back. He just nodded once, as if that distinction mattered more than anything else we'd said. Then he walked out. I sat there for a moment longer. The room was almost empty now. Daniel approached quietly. You handled that well? I answered the question I said. That's more than most people do. I nodded slightly. What happens next? I asked. It moves beyond us, he said. Regulatory review, possibly federal. I let that settle. And Ethan Daniel didn't answer immediately. He's not in control of this anymore, he said finally. Neither of us said what that meant. We didn't need to. I gathered my things slowly, closed my laptop, and stood, because for the first time since that night in the restaurant, this wasn't about what Ethan said, or how he saw me, or even what he'd done. It was about something larger, and whatever came next was already in motion. 3 months later, I signed my name on the last page of the divorce papers in a quiet office that didn't ask questions. No dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, just a clean line drawn where something had already ended. Ethan didn't contest it. That was the part people didn't understand when I told them later. They expected a fight, assets blame explanations. There wasn't one, because by then he had other things to deal with. The investigation had moved beyond internal review within a week of that meeting. Once regulatory authorities got involved, everything accelerated. Documents were subpoenaed. Access logs were reconstructed. Financial trails that looked complex at first began to simplify under pressure. Patterns always do. Mark Ellison was placed on administrative leave within days. By the end of the second month, he was gone. Not publicly at first. Quietly. The kind of exit that suggests negotiation behind closed doors. But it didn't stay quiet for long. Enough details surfaced to make it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system, structured, layered, designed to pass as normal until someone looked closely enough. Ethan's role was smaller than Ellison's, but not small enough to disappear. He wasn't charged immediately. That part took longer. Reviews, statements, cross-verification. But his access had been real. His approvals had been logged. His decisions had been traceable. He knew that. So did I. The last time we spoke wasn't in a courtroom. It was in a hallway outside a legal office. He looked thinner, tired in a way that didn't come from lack of sleep. Did it feel worth it, he asked, not accusing, not angry, just asking. I thought about that for a second, about the restaurant, about the word he used, about everything that followed. It wasn't about winning, I said. He nodded slightly like that answer made sense to him in a way it hadn't before. I meant what I said, he added after a moment. About pressure. About not having options. I know I said. That surprised him, but having pressure doesn't remove responsibility. I continued. It just makes your choices more visible. He didn't argue. Didn't try to explain. He just stood there absorbing it. I hope you find a way to rebuild, I said. And I meant it. Not for us, just for him. Then I walked away. I didn't look back. A week later, I received an official offer from Daniel, compliance lead, not as a favor, not as compensation, as a role. The email was direct, structured, clear expectations, clear responsibilities, exactly the kind of work I had always respected. I accepted, not because of what had happened, but because I had already been doing the work just without the title. My new office overlooked the same city but from a different building, different view, different perspective. The work was heavier, more visible, less forgiving, but it was honest, and that mattered more than anything. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying as long as I did, if I wish I had left earlier, if I ignored signs I shouldn't have. I don't answer those questions the way they expect, because regret assumes I didn't learn anything. And I did. I learned how easily control can hide behind confidence, how manipulation doesn't always sound like manipulation. Sometimes it sounds like logic, like responsibility, like loyalty. I learned that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's observation. Sometimes it's timing. And sometimes it's the space you need to understand what's really happening before you decide what to do about it. I also learned that walking away doesn't mean you lost. It means you stopped participating in something that required you to shrink. That night in the restaurant when Ethan called me worthless, I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was still figuring out which ones mattered. Now I know. And I don't need to say them out loud anymore, because the life I built after that moment says enough. There's a difference between revenge and boundaries, and it took me a long time to understand that clearly. Revenge focuses on the other person, what they lose, how they suffer, how things balance out. Boundaries focus on you, what you allow, what you accept, and what you walk away from without needing permission. If you've ever been in a situation where someone used pressure, family, or responsibility to justify crossing a line, you probably know how confusing it can feel, especially when the person doing it believes they're right. But understanding someone's reasons doesn't mean you have to accept their choices. And forgiving someone doesn't mean giving them access to you again. That distinction matters more than people think. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, I'd really like to hear your perspective. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Sometimes knowing we're not the only ones navigating these situations makes it easier to move forward. And if you want more stories like this ones that explore complicated family dynamics, difficult choices, and what it actually looks like to rebuild, feel free to subscribe. No pressure, just an open invitation. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.